Okay, here we are. Once again, Erik. How are you today?
Once again. Yeah, I'm pretty good, man. How about you?
Yeah, I'm okay. This is my last day before I go on holiday. So I'm pretty excited. This is the last bit of work I'm going to do for the next couple of weeks. Then I'm going to be on the beach doing as little work as possible. But
Yeah, uh,
you don't get to go on holiday for a while, do you?
no, I go in like 3 weeks time. But I'm happy for you, man. Uh, and also I'm extra happy because then you can just rest and not think about what we're gonna talk about today, uh, which is
Yeah.
uh, it's happened quite a lot, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's pretty some pretty scary stuff happened this month. It looked like
Yeah,
we might be heading for some serious war for a while there. Hopefully, everything will stay calm in over the rest of summer. Everybody should go on holiday. Netanyahu and the Iranians can go on holiday. Everybody can just go to a beach. They need to chill out, man. They need to chill out.
yeah. So
Um, yeah,
should we get straight on with it?
yeah. Let's jump into it. Let's jump into it. You've got some questions about what we're gonna be talking about.
Yeah, so just to get the timeline straight,
Hmm.
like actually what did happen between Israel and Iran?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to use the Brent. You can see here on my screen, I've got the Brent crude oil price. We're using this instead of the WTI just because it's more affected by geopolitical shocks. And we can see here we're rolling back to this is the month of almost the whole month of June, but we're particularly interested with around here, the 13th of June. And this is where everything kicked off. Um, this was when Israel launched a bunch of air assaults on Iran, specifically Iran's nuclear facilities and nuclear enrichment places. So Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow. This was simultaneous with a sabotage attack as well. Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, had obviously completely infiltrated the Iranian intelligence community because they knew exactly where to hit, who to hit, and they very quickly wiped out most of Iran's top nuclear scientists and a lot of the leadership of the Revolutionary Guard, which is the main armed force, the most powerful armed forces unit in Iran. So it was a swift lightning assault, unexpected, I have to say, from the Iranian side. But you can also see why, like if you think of it from a realpolitik point of view, why Netanyahu chose this time. Um, their campaign against Hamas, Israel's campaign against Hamas in Gaza, it's been going on since Hamas invaded Israel back in 2023. That has severely weakened, if not completely, almost completely obliterated Hamas. And then they launched an assault on Hezbollah. You may remember with the exploding mobile phones, exploding pages, um, and that took out a lot of Hezbollah's leadership, and then followed that up with air assaults and ground incursion that really severely curtailed Hezbollah's capabilities. Syria, the Syrian regime under Assad was friendly to Iran, and that has been deposed as well. Russia, who's Iran's one of Iran's most important allies, has got their hands full with Ukraine at the moment and their own war machine, as well as all focused on the Ukraine conflict. So Iran has very quickly, over the course of about 18 months, lost a lot of allies. Lost a lot. They're very severely weakened, and Netanyahu, sensing his moment, launched this attack. So you can understand why he did it. He was also obviously hoping to draw the United States into the conflict, and also he's unabashed, talking about regime change in Iran. He doesn't want to see the mullahs leading the country anymore. So we saw this attack on the 13th, and that we can see here the Brent crude oil price spiked, and then over the course of the next few days, there was a lot of tit for tat. There was back and forth, but it was pretty one sided, to be honest. Iran, their missiles, their missile capability was quickly knocked out, or at least severely damaged by Israeli fighter jets and Israeli missiles. They knew exactly where to hit. And I think surprising everybody, Iran's missile defenses were very poor. I mean, it was a real shock to the international military community, the strategic community. They were surprised at how quickly Iran's missile defense systems collapsed in the face of the Israeli onslaught. And so it became very quickly clear that this is a pretty one-sided conflict. Israel had pretty much complete control over the skies over much of Iran, so they bombing Tehran with impunity and bombing nuclear sites wherever they wanted. Basically, they had complete control. Um, and so this is the state of play happened over. You can see here from the 13th until this last weekend just gone, where we had tit for tat, but the Israelis doing more of the tatting, if you see what I mean. And it looked like this was going to be it was pretty unstable, and the U.S. through Donald Trump was saying, "Oh yeah, we're not sure whether we want to get involved in this." Trump, one of the big cornerstones of his election win and the MAGA thing is this American isolationism. They don't want expensive wars anymore. They don't want another Iraq. They don't want another Afghanistan. This is a lot of the argument behind trying to find peace in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So this idea, I think, to a lot of his base of getting involved in the war in Iran was really bad. And so I think a lot of the international strategic community had concluded that the United States was not going to get involved in this. And then Trump, as he often does, I will give him that, surprised everybody
Yeah.
by bombing one of Iran's deepest, most well-protected nuclear uranium enrichment facilities over last weekend. And we can see here exactly what happened here. This is Friday when the markets closed. Monday when the markets opened, we can see the oil price gapping. It jumped. Now, it didn't jump that high. And I think a lot of traders, and this is something we're going to talk about, a lot of oil traders were in very much a wait and see mode because after the bombing, and it was, and to Trump's credit, they only bombed these nuclear enrichment facilities. They weren't involved in widespread bombing like the Israeli Air Force had been. And then it was all about waiting to see what Iran's response was. And on Monday the 23rd, this Monday just gone, Iran launched an attack on the US base in Qatar, which is a long-standing US base. And we can see here, and I think for a lot of people who don't understand the oil market, don't watch oil market very, very much, they would conclude that that was an escalation. They would think that Iran's attacking a U.S. Air Force base in Qatar would be an escalation of this conflict by trying to draw U.S. into the war. But actually, what this was, and a lot of this is what oil traders realized, this was a de-escalation. Iran had already flagged the United States that it was going to do this, that it was going to attack, and the United States had already moved all of their equipment and personnel and planes out of that Air Force base on the 18th. So last week, they'd already done this. And oil traders knew through open source intelligence social media posts, they knew this. They knew that that base is empty. And so they understood immediately that this was Iran's way of saying, okay, look, we have to do something symbolic here. We can't just let this go unanswered, but this is a pretty weak response, and it's the Iranian regime's way of signaling that they wanted to de-escalate. And so oil traders saw this, and you can see here within 7 minutes of the first launch of the Iranian airstrikes, Brent crude began to slide, and it fell down. And this is, and you can see here oil prices remained low. And it's going to continue to remain low. And then there's a number of reasons for that, which I think we'll come into. But that's basically the play-by-play of what happened over June. And now we're in this U.S. brokered ceasefire mode, where we're not going to have any. We're probably not going to see any further strikes. what is, I mean, I say that, but with, Netanyahu is kind of his own man. He's a bit of a wild card.
Yeah,
But I think Donald Trump has made it very clear that he doesn't want to see any further attacks in Iran.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's kind of the timeline of events.
yeah. And like as you say, like we can see it through the oil,
Hmm.
with like how everything went down. But like, how did the rest of the market react to all of this? I guess like the big one is the oil because it's the Middle East and everything.
No.
But the rest of the market,
Yeah, no, quite interesting. I mean, you can see we've gone through how oil reacted, and but I want to just talk about oil again a little bit more briefly in a wider context.
yeah,
Oil prices are subdued at the moment for a number of reasons, and they're quite low historically. And the reason why this fell so catastrophically again, the oil price, is we've seen uh, huge increases in oil production by OPEC Plus over the last 6 months. They're increasing supply. There's a couple of reasons for this. They've been trying to constrain supply the last few years, but this hasn't worked. OPEC members have been repeatedly breaking the agreement to constrain supply. Notably, Kazakhstan has been pumping more oil, and I think OPEC got as a group, but also Saudi Arabia as the de facto leader of OPEC, and they got fed up with them, Saudi Arabia constricting supply, but then other members of OPEC carrying on pumping supply. So OPEC has been you can argue, oversupplying the market. And a lot of this may also have political reasons. Um, there's an argument here that, because Donald Trump has made it very clear to the Saudis that he wants to see low energy prices. And it's good for him, it's good for the United States. And maybe this is Saudi Arabia's way of sucking up to Trump, keeping him sweet. So far, it doesn't seem to be working, but you never know. And I assume there's going to be another other end to that deal at some point. So you have this oversupply, and we've also got Donald Trump's tariffs that are due to kick in this year, and the global forecast economic growth is pretty weak for second half 2025 and 2026. And when you see global economic weakness, then you see lower demand for energy, and so therefore oil prices are going to come down. So you've got this double whammy of increased supply, not just from Saudi Arabia and OPEC, but also from the United States. I think United States, yeah, America's oil production is a record in March in the shale oil belt. So we got this huge supply coming into the market, where the forecast is for reduced demand, and on top of that, something our colleague Ida wrote about the other day is that maybe this is traders getting used to just saying this is a new normal, chaos, chaos and war, and nobody really, and they've seen this story happen over and over again, especially the last few months. People are maybe a bit inured to the chaos in the markets, and unless somebody actually physically blows up an oil tanker, or as we'll come to, closes the Straits of Hormuz, then they're not going to get too bothered. So
yeah,
we've got these three things happening. They're keeping prices low. But if we have a look at the DXY, this is the US dollar index over the same period, we can see here, and this is interesting particularly because the US dollar has traditionally been a safe haven asset. And this means that in times of geopolitical uncertainty, you generally see investors and speculators flock to the US dollar. They'll sell out of high risk assets, they move to the dollar. Um, but that correlation has been kind of tested, maybe even broken a little bit this year since Donald Trump came into office. We haven't seen those same safe haven flows exist on the same level. And I think a lot of this is to do with concerns over Donald Trump's economic stewardship of the United States. But in this case, we saw kind of a return tradition. We saw here on the 13th, when the attacks first happened, we can see here the US dollar spiked, and certainly over the when the US, you can see, actually launched, when US bombed the Iranian facilities over the weekend, we can actually see the gapping occur here. But then once again, like the oil price, when everybody realized that Iran really wasn't seriously considering making this conflict worse than it already was, we can see the dollar fell as people moved out of US dollar assets and back into higher risk assets. Same thing with gold price. We can see here 13th, we can see the gold price go through the roof. And then again, when it became clear that Iran was no longer interested in going toe to toe with Israel, we can see that the gold price fell, and similarly for the S&P 500, for stocks, we can see here stocks fell immediately when the war started, and then once everybody realized that Iran was going to calm down, we can see the stock prices came back up again, and the S&P 500 just broke its record, by the way, just as we started up here. Yeah. So good news for investors in there. So that's basically how the market reacted, as you might expect, basically, as you might expect.
Yeah, and that also like bring us up to like, I guess, the truce that we're having right now, Donald Trump's truce.
Yeah.
And the market, as you said, had just slide back to, I guess, normal after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I think we're seeing a bit of a rebound, from suppressed markets when, it's that feeling of all of a sudden we don't have to be so scared anymore. So people are piling out of haven assets, moving out of gold, moving out of the US dollar, putting it back into stocks like this. So I think we're seeing a broad rally across the board. There's also been some relatively good news coming out of the United States recently. We've seen the manufacturing increase more than expected. That data came out the other day. There's also rumors that Trump was thinking of removing the chair of the Fed, Jerome Powell, earlier than when his date was supposed to. I think he's due to leave at the end of the month. At the end of the year. But there was rumors that he was thinking about replacing him before that, and we can see that here in the US dollar. The slide in the US dollar this week. This was people worrying about Trump interfering politically with monetary policy by replacing Jay Powell. There's since been word from the White House that he is not considering that. But this is a story that's going to continue rumbling on, and it does contribute to US dollar weakness. I think until Jay Powell actually leaves the office, we're going to continue to have this kind of worry of Trump's political interference in monetary policy.
Yeah. Let's just play with our thoughts for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is gonna happen still, or like if it's not gonna happen. It hasn't happened yet, but let's say that Iran blocks the US the oil export. What would have happened if that would occur?
You mean if they blocked the Straits of Hormuz, if they closed
Yeah.
them? Yeah, this was the main fear, and especially for a time there in the middle of the conflict, when I think the parliament passed a permit. They gave permission for the Iranian government to close the Straits of Hormuz if they wanted to, and this gets everybody very nervous because I think somewhere in the region of 20% of global oil supply passes through the Straits of Hormuz, and that would have an immediate and very powerful impact on oil prices. We would probably see Brent immediately shoot up to over 100, maybe even higher, 110, to levels we haven't seen for many years. You would also, you'd specifically, the impact would be on Asian economies. You would see huge impact across the board on the markets. You would see flight to the dollar. You would see gold price go through the roof. You would see stock markets tumble worldwide. And I think the long-term effects, in the medium-term effects, would be severe impact on Asian economies because they're really reliant on the Straits of Hormuz for oil. But it would be a bit like, Iran, cutting off its nose to spite its face, shooting itself in the foot. Because Iran is in dire need, they need the Straits of Hormuz as well, and they're completely reliant on oil for their foreign exchange. So it would be, pun not intended, but it would be a nuclear option for Iran. But look, if you corner a dangerous animal, it's going to bite. It's going to bite back, and I think a lot of military strategists in the United States um, were aware that Iran was a cornered animal at this point. It'd been soundly defeated, as I said. It was a pretty one-sided conflict, and it'd been soundly defeated by Israel. It was hugely weakened, and any further pressure on the regime could have resulted in them taking this nuclear option, closing the Straits of Hormuz, which nobody wanted. I mean, we've got enough bad things rolling through the global economy at the moment with the Trump tariffs and the war in Ukraine. There's enough instability. As the last thing anybody wanted would be serious disruption to global energy supplies.
Yeah, and with everything like in mind,
Mm-hmm.
what can happen now? Basically, it's hard to tell, I know,
Mm-hmm.
but your general thoughts on
Yeah, I mean, my baseline is that this ceasefire is going to continue. It's going to hold. I think. I mean, it's interesting because Israel and the United States are saying, "Oh, we've achieved our goals. We've destroyed these nuclear facilities," right? But then there's been leaked reports from the Pentagon and then also from the EU saying that Iran had actually already moved a lot of the enriched uranium from these sites. So even though these sites may be damaged, maybe in some cases irreparably damaged, they can no longer enrich uranium to weapons grade level. The actual enriched uranium that is almost or very close to being weapons grade level is undamaged and is elsewhere. So Iran, I think the initial assessment from the intelligence community, at least the public open source intelligence community, is that Iran still has capability for making a nuclear weapon very quickly if they so wanted. So I think and the regime, it looks like it's going to stay in charge. There's not going to be any regime change. Ayatollah Khamenei has come out of hiding, which means he's no longer afraid of being assassinated by the US or Israel. Whether that's a bright idea or not remains to be seen. As I said, Netanyahu is a bit of a wild card. But it looks like the regime is going to stay in place. The ceasefire should hold, but that I don't think we've seen the last of it. I don't think we've heard the last of this. I think oil prices are going to stabilize where they are for the time being. We're coming into summer, so demand is going to be high, even if the long-term outlook is poor. I would think we'll see oil prices probably slip below 60 once summer is over, probably down into the mid 50s range. So that's my baseline. Is that ceasefire continues? The regime they've already started executing so-called Israeli agents. They're going to stay in place. They've still got their stockpile of enriched uranium. They probably can't do anything on the industrial scale like they did before. But we're going to see a shaky stability take place. That's my baseline. There's always the possibility of an upsurge in violence. This is especially from Iran. I would say the danger is from their proxies. They fund proxy militias in Yemen, obviously the Houthis, but they also fund Hezbollah. They fund Hamas, even though they're hugely weakened. Their main source of their main proxy strength at the moment is the Iraqi militias. They've got a lot of very well armed Iranian allied militias in Iraq, and so you could see some kind of flare up there, which we'd start all over again. We could trigger. I'd say that's probably the biggest danger. The Straits of Hormuz being closed or any kind of true diplomatic breakthrough, I think these are non-starters. I don't think these are going to happen. For the Straits of Hormuz to be closed, we'd need to see this all start up again and then to escalate further. I think that's unlikely. But we may see some kind of attack by Iranian proxies. That's maybe not signed off by the regime, but that will cause further instability. And Israel has showed that they will. If anything like that happens, they're gonna react, and they'll react very quickly.
Yeah, and like one thing for certain is that Iran and Israel, they aren't quite the best of friends, particularly. So yeah, let's see what happens. Hopefully nothing bad. But hey, honestly, you never know these days.
You don't. No, we're living in interesting times, and but I think I'm hoping that we've seen the end of this, and that both Iran and Israel can calm down, and that we don't see any upsurge in attacks or anything from the proxies. I mean, Israel's got its own war to fight. You know, they're still busy obliterating the Gaza Strip, so they don't want to be too distracted from that currently. So I think that's probably where we stand. And then, of course, now we're coming into the summer months, and this is a bit of a silly season for summer. There's lower liquidity, there's lower volume traded. Everybody is on holiday, and I think we're going to see, hopefully, between now and September, we'll see things quieten down a bit in the markets.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens until July at least, and
Yeah,
what has happened then. Thanks so much, Chris. I hope you have a wonderful vacation.
yeah. Thanks, Eric, and I'll see you in a few weeks when I'm back. And then you'll be
Yeah,
going on vacation.
yeah. I'm probably not gonna be here next month.
That's
Let's
right.
see what happens with that also. But
Yeah,
for
that's right.
now, at least, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we'll see if we can find a replacement for you while you're away.
yeah,
Super. All right, Eric. You have a great weekend.
yeah. Thanks, man.
Thanks.